Good evening. Welcome to Jam Time. I'm Pastor Lisa. I'm glad you're here tonight. Tonight we're continuing with our Learning with Dr. Seuss, and I'm going to share a little bit from the story Horton Hears a Who, and then we'll kind of relate it to our faith and see what God has to say about it. Horton Hears a Who. On the 15th of May, in the jungle of Newell, in the heat of the day, in the cool of a pool, he was splashing, enjoying the jungle's great joys, when Horton the elephant heard a small noise. So Horton stopped splashing. He looked toward the sound. "That's funny," thought Horton. "There's no one around." Then he heard it again, just a very faint yelp, as if some tiny person were calling for help. "I'll help you," said Horton, "but who are you? Where?" He looked, and he could see nothing there but a small speck of dust blowing past through the air. "I say," murmured Horton, "I've never heard tell of a small speck of dust that is able to yell. So you know what I think. Why, I think there must be someone on top of that small speck of dust. Some sort of creature of very small size, too small to be seen by an elephant's eyes. Some poor little person who's shaking with fear that'll blow in the pool. He has nowhere way to steer. I'll just have to save him, because after all, a person's a person, no matter how small." So gently, and using the greatest of care, the elephant stretched his great trunk through the air, and he lifted the dust speck and carried it over and placed it down safe on a very soft clover. "Humph!" whooped a voice. 'Twas a sour kangaroo, and the young kangaroo in her pouch said, "Humph, too. Why, that speck is as small as a head of a pin. A person on that? Why, there never has been." "Believe me," said Horton, "I tell you sincerely, my eyes are quite keen, and I heard him quite clearly. I know there's a person down there, and what's more, quite likely there's two, even three, quite likely even four. For a family for all that we know, a family with children just starting to grow. So please," Horton said, "just as a favor to me, try not to disturb them, and please let them be." "I think you're a fool," laughed the sour kangaroo, and the young kangaroo in her pouch said, "Me too. You're the biggest blame fool in the jungle of Newell," and the kangaroos plunged in the cool of the pool. "What terrible splashing!" The elephants frowned. "I can't let my very small persons get drowned. I've got to protect them. I'm bigger than they." So he plucked up the clover and hustled away. Through the high jungle treetops, the news quickly spread. "He talks to a dust speck. He's out of his head. Just look at him walk with that speck on that flower." And Horton walked worrying almost an hour. "Should I put this speck down?" Horton thought with alarm. "If I do, these small persons may come to great harm. I can't put them down, and I won't. After all, a person's a person, no matter how small." See, Horton learned that there was a whole town named Whoville on that very speck of dust. Horton promised to keep them safe, and he wouldn't let them down. The other animals wouldn't believe him, and that there was people on this speck of dust. They couldn't see them, and they couldn't hear them, so they made fun of him. The monkeys took the clover and the speck and gave it to Vladikoff, and he flew off with it. The eagle flew off with it and dropped it in a field of clover. Horton followed him tiredly over mountains and came to that clover field and searched every clover till he found it on the 3 millionth one. Would you search through 3 million clovers to find a speck of dust? Horton did it because, after all, a person's a person, no matter how small. I'd like to share with you from the Bible in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 48, verse 11. God said, leave your children, and I will keep them alive. Your widows, your women, too, can depend on me. All of people can depend on God. We, too, can depend on God. We can pray to God anytime, and God hears us and gives us strength and reminds us that we aren't alone. The animals weren't happy that Horton found this speck. They tied Horton up, and they were going to put that speck in a pot of betel nut juice. Betel nut juice. Ew, sounds terrible. The speck would burn up. But Horton fought back, and he told all of the animals that they needed to make noise so that, or all of the people in Whoville to make noise so that the animals could hear them. And they did all that noise, and still the animals couldn't hear him. And then they finally found one little boy who wasn't doing anything. He wasn't helping. He wasn't doing his part. Instead, he was just playing with his yo-yo. So they told him he had to make a noise, and when he did, he yelled, "Yop!" And that was loud enough. So on the count of 3, we're going to try this. I want you to yell "Yop" with me. Really loud. Because the animals weren't hearing, and so Jojo had to make his sound when all of the other people in Who were banging on stuff and making all this noise. So 1, 2, 3, "Yop!" Yeah, really loud. Let's try it again. 1, 2, 3, "Yop!" Well, finally, at last, the animals heard. And the kangaroo and her little kangaroo stopped making fun of Horton and instead said they would help protect the dust speck too, the little town of Whoville. The people of Whoville could depend on Horton, and we want to be dependable too. Like if we say we have somebody's back, then we want to be there for them when they need help or when they need something, or just even to be their friend and to smile with them and laugh with them. We can depend on God because God has our back. God isn't here on earth in person, but God places lots of people around us to help us, to have our back. Who are the people who help take care of you, who you can really depend on when you need something, or when you're lonely or sick or tired, or maybe just someone to play with? You know, you can always call that person and they'll be there for you. There are people around us that we can depend on. So as we think about those, Horton, I want to show you my Lego creations. Here's Horton the elephant. And here's the kangaroo, who said "Humph" and kind of made fun of him, but then decided she would help too. And here's the eagle, who flew the clover over and dropped it in that big field of clover. I didn't make the monkeys, but these are the ones I made. And maybe at home you can make a monkey or make one of these, so you can make your animals for Horton. Well, tonight, as we think about the Who's, they were making all this noise, but yet other people couldn't hear because they were so little. Like, it was such a small voice. Even if they were yelling, it was like and they couldn't hear. So I thought we'd do a little experiment tonight with sound, and to learn a little bit about sound and how we can hear. So we took straws. So if you have straws at home, especially if you've been eating anywhere at fast food, you get some straws. You take a straw and you tape the end closed. So you can fold it over and just put a piece of tape there so that the air isn't getting through. And then, and you cut them off. Okay, so I cut mine off first so you'd have different sizes, and then I taped the bottom so that air couldn't get through. And then this is called a pan flute. And we're going to listen to the different sounds. It's kind of tricky at first, but you put this straw right here in the middle of your mouth. So it's a little tricky, but you could hear the sound. So this one down here is a deeper sound. A deeper sound. So why do you think that? What do you think the length of the straws have to do with the sound? And how does it make a sound at all? Well, first of all, when we're blowing the air, it vibrates and makes a sound. So if they're open at the bottom, then that air kind of goes through and it doesn't vibrate enough to make a sound. So we close that off. The length changes the pitch. In the lower, sometimes I can get it right. Nope. Nope. I've lost my touch. But the deeper the pitch is, the longer, because there's would be more vibrations. And here we have shorter, and you get the pitch gets a higher sound. So it's all about vibrations and the air. And you'll learn more about that in science, but just so you'll have kind of an idea and you can play around with it. But you know what, whether the pitch is high or whether it's low, whether we're big or whether we're small, God hears us when we talk to him. After all, a person's a person, no matter how small. Jesus reminds us that God even knows how many hairs are on our head. That he says, consider the lilies of the field and how much God cares for them. That God cares so much for us. So would you join me as we close by talking to God? If you'll just repeat after me. God, thank you so much for loving me. Help me to see that a person's a person, no matter how small. Thank you that I can depend on you, that you care for me and love me. Help me to treat others the same. Amen. Thank you all. Have a good night.